Okay, we've got another good question that we will be answering from the Word of God today. The question is, are we under the Ten Commandments today? I think the answer is going to surprise some of you. We are not under the Ten Commandments today. Well, does that mean that we can murder and commit adultery and steal and cheat? No, that doesn't mean that at all. But what it does mean is that the Ten Commandments were given to the nation of Israel, God's people, in the Old Testament as they were coming out of Egyptian bondage. You can read about that in Exodus chapter number 20, where the Ten Commandments are listed. But from other passages, we see that the Ten Commandments were not intended for everyone. It was a special covenant that God made with the nation of Israel. I refer you to Exodus chapter 34 and verse number 27. But it's also very clear in the New Testament that the Old Law, or the Law of Moses, or the Old Testament, is no longer in effect. In fact, Jesus said in Matthew 5, verses 17 and 18, that he fulfilled the law. The Old Testament accomplished its purpose in that it was bringing into effect a new and better way, the way of Christ. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 13 and 14, we see that the law of Moses was nailed to the cross. Christ is, the Hebrew writer says in Hebrews 9:15, the mediator of a new covenant. In fact, in Galatians chapter 6 and verse number 2, this new law is referred to as the law of Christ that has, in fact, replaced the former law, according to Hebrews 10 and verse 9 and chapter 8 and verse 13. The truth is that the law of Christ has retained, however, 9 of the 10 commandments, though there's not any specific listing as such, like we find in Exodus 20 of the Old Testament. The lone commandment that is not found in the New Testament of the Ten Commandments is in regard to keeping the Sabbath day. There is no such command in the New Testament, but Christians are told to observe the Lord's Day as they assemble together for worship as the church and fellowship with one another on the first day of the week, according to Acts chapter 20 and verse number 7. So instead of merely focusing on the Ten Commandments, we today need to embrace the totality of the New Testament law of Jesus. That is the spiritual law that we are under today and that we are accountable to today. And I refer you there to John chapter 12 and verse 48 that states that the words of Jesus will judge us on the last day. Thank you for studying with us. We look forward to your questions. Please send those to us anytime.